have a couple questions also. One of my questions has to do with whether or not a higher visibility, higher profile is deemed a good idea for Chelsea, like Nobel Prize. Those was really high profile.
Hold the mic right.
Okay,
Is
so
that something that's considered a good thing for her in the long run, or is it becoming that she becomes a martyr?
no, I think so. I'll repeat it for her. So she's wondering if like having a high profile nature now is a good thing for her or not, and from various organizations. And when I talked to an earlier person that asked the question, and even with your question of, you know, you as the defense attorney going and speaking on Chelsea's behalf, I have to be very careful in the manner in which I do that. But if there are average citizens and organizations that are doing that on her behalf, that's wonderful. That is not something that I think we have to worry about. And the people that, you know, the Department of Defense won't really pay a lot of attention. But the great thing about the Department of Defense is it has to pay attention to our elected leaders. And you see that anytime a senator or congressman gets upset about something. There's congressionals and whatnot, and we as the Department of Defense jump through a lot of hoops, and we immediately respond to our elected leaders. So it's those people that we need to get to care. And if we get those people to care, then real change can happen.
No, I have one more question. I have a question also relative to what a lot of big whistleblowing events where you might have to do the convention, war crimes, what have you, would have created a bit of a storm. Where you might see congressional hearings, all kinds of things sort of started to turn and move, the wheels turning at a congressional level. Or I guess I'm wondering, where is that? Did that ever sort of start? You just can't go there. It looks to, there's just not enough support for Chelsea to begin with at that level. What, am I just missing something?
No, I mean, I think that going back to the time in which this was released, had Chelsea initially, when she reached out to the Washington Post and the New York Times, had they responded to her, and Chelsea released this to the New York Times and Washington Post, I think things would have been a lot different for her. A lot different. But she reached out to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks is really, I think, the new face of journalism. That type of crowdsourcing, that type of not being accountable to any sort of big corporation or sponsors where you can actually print what you want to print. That type of organization is a threat. And when she reached out to that organization, then you can take a look at our elected leaders, how they responded immediately to that. It was an act of terrorism. It was, you know, this is going to be the end of our democracy. You know, all the things, bad things that could happen. You had congressmen saying that Chelsea should get the death penalty. Long before she ever even walked into a courtroom, you had the president saying she broke the law. So, unfortunately, she was a victim of circumstances, how the releases came. Had they came through the New York Times, Washington Post, you might have seen congressmen go, wait a second, we didn't know about this. Hey, this is proof that we didn't, you know, there are a lot of innocent Iraqi civilians being killed, and we're not fully accounting the number of civilian deaths. So it's just the way the circumstances broke.
So I have two separate questions. One is, could you talk about, you mentioned that the release did good. Could you elaborate on that? That's one. And number two is, we don't know anything about you. Who are you, and what have you gone through the transition with Chelsea? You know, what was your ordeal with her?
Okay, well, you know, so I mean, I think the good, it all depends on your perspective. And I said, I do believe it ended the Iraq War. And for me, not having soldiers in harm's way is a good thing. So I was very happy. I spent some of my time in Iraq. I spent multiple birthdays in the Middle East. You know, not necessarily the place I wanted to be, but that was my duty. I was very happy to see us out of Iraq. I'll be even happier when I see us out of Afghanistan. I think that was a major good that happened from that. But then also, like I said, everything else will be your perspective, but having information, being informed, I think it did a lot of good. The diplomatic aspect, I'm surprised it hasn't taken more hold, because there are a lot of things we do as a country diplomatically that I'm surprised by, especially when I read what we're doing. And then, lastly, your second part for me, I'll just answer one aspect. How it changed me was it really did take 3 years of my life. 2 years solely focused on this. And now it's something that is a mission for me to get the outcome that I thought should have happened during the trial. And that was Chelsea walking out of the courtroom a free person.
Just in line with sharing that other organizations also that are keeping Chelsea in the spotlight and the value of that to stop the intimidation of others who, the government wants to make her an example to intimidate other whistleblowers. But the Payday Men's Network in London and Queer Strike in San Francisco are organizing happy birthday vigils for Chelsea in Trafalgar Square on December 17th, and in San Francisco and in Philadelphia. So I have a flyer on that if people would like to know more about those plans. But it's important to know that, the range of groups that are working to keep her out there for us.
Thank you for that.
Thanks. Insofar as you're at liberty to do so, can you comment on what pressure was put on Chelsea to implicate Julian Assange in exchange for leniency? And if it's possible, could you comment on how much of the degrading and humiliating treatment to which was subjected was simply because that's our kind of government, as opposed to being done tactically to induce cooperation?
I'll actually I think the last question presents an interesting aspect. When the President of the United States came out and said she broke the law, that was very early on in the process. And you had a lot of elected leaders also saying very critical things, such as she should get the death penalty. What that did is that gave a lot of leeway to Quantico to basically treat her the way they wanted to. And the documents, and you can see this through documents that are available now on the FOIA website. Other journalists have written about it. Alexa's covered it pretty good. How high up the treatment of her went. And this is stuff that the commanding general of the Marine Corps was getting briefed on, the highest general officer in the Marine Corps. The highest general officer attorney in the Marine Corps was talking about this on a regular basis. And when you had people that high up condoning everything, because the emails coming down where you're doing everything right, don't worry about the criticism, you had people who felt that they could do anything they wanted to Chelsea, and they did. And it really was, and this was an example of us making a difference. Because when enough people complained about it, and we got, not just us, but we got the law professors, constitutional law professors from just about every university writing on to a petition of she's not being treated fairly, and this looks like cruel and unusual punishment. Amnesty International and other organizations weighed in. Finally, to save face, they said, oh, the USDB at Fort Leavenworth, the JRCF, the Joint Regional Correctional Facility, is now complete and has a better place for her. She was never going to that facility, but for the attention that was brought to this issue. And when she gets there, magically now she doesn't have to be held in solitary confinement. And she's a model inmate, she's not at risk of anything. But most troubling is when we raise this as an unlawful pretrial punishment issue at trial, the judge agreed, yeah, that was unlawful pretrial punishment, it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. 112 days is what you get. The message that sends is not a good message. And you think about that, just juxtapose that against the idea of sending Chelsea to jail for 35 years. The only rationale, and it could be in the judge's mind, that this is the appropriate sentence to send a message. Well, that same message should have been sent with unlawful pretrial punishment. And had it done so, then Chelsea should have, again, walked out as a free person. So that was really problematic. And I'm sorry, remind me on the first, I was transitioning.
The question is how much of this
Pressure, okay, so then,
degradation had in mind turning Chelsea?
yeah, so
Okay,
the government tried initially, I can talk about some of the initial things. The government tried initially to offer various pretrial agreements where she would plead in exchange for sentence limitation. I can tell you that the offers they were giving to us were in excess of the sentence that she received. So they really felt as if we should be coming with our hat in hand saying, give us whatever, because they thought for sure you're going to be found guilty of aiding the enemy, you're going to get life without parole. So you're going to take this sentence and be happy with it. And obviously we didn't do that. The only pressure, I guess, was that mindset that they would have weighed in on her of, you're going to get aiding the enemy, be found guilty of that. You're going to
Primarily as an example against other future whistleblowers who might be inclined to do the same thing.
I think so, because when you think about the idea, when asked, would it make a difference if she gave information to the New York Times as opposed to WikiLeaks, the government said no. So,
I can implicate Assange as a co-conspirator prior to release.
no, I know, I understand what you're saying. When the initial offers were given,
Yeah.
it was always in cooperation to testify against any future proceedings, in any future proceedings. Now, they never just said Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, but that was the clear implication of the offer.
My question is, in the course of your involvement with this, have you noticed that perhaps the government has decreased its virulence and its aggressiveness in prosecution, considering former cases where they seem to prosecute people to send a message, they seem to have backed off of that. It could have been much worse than what she received. And I'm wondering if they're realizing that, they picked the wrong horse to beat on this one.
No, I think the government sees this still as a victory because of the 35-year sentence. I think in their mind, it still sends the message that they want to send, that you disclose classified information at your peril and at your risk. And so I do think that it has the intended impact, and that's a chilling impact on future whistleblowers. Certainly that's probably educated Snowden on how he was going to release his information and where he was going to go. So.
I have a couple of questions. Number one, I want to make sure I'm not spreading the wrong information, but I heard that Julian Assange, before he released any of the documents, that he had called in independent journalists to review them to make sure there was nothing in those documents that would threaten the security of the American people.
I don't know.
Have you heard that? No. I heard that, I think it was on Current TV, which is, Pardon? Anybody else hear that? Okay, my other quick question is just to bring us up to date, and this is kind of doing a backflash before Brad, before Brad. Chelsea, I still have a difficult time with that, I'm sorry. I advocated for 2 years for private manning, and I still will advocate, but my new passion, because I went to a 9/11 Truth Conference when I was back in Washington, D.C., to the side of the Pentagon facing me. That was hit. And what makes me so angry as an American citizen is to think that 3,000 lives were taken because of corrupt activities intentionally. And it wasn't terrorists, unless you want to call Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, etc., the terrorists, because they were. So I want to know why in the world these men have actually been prosecuted and found guilty. I mean, they can't go certain areas because if they do, they could be taken. I just wanted to know why here in the United States of America have they not been found criminally guilty?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that. But that's, again, that goes back a little bit to making sure as an informed citizen we keep our elected leaders accountable. And when we see wrongdoing done, then she's awesome. And we try to ensure that those who have done something wrong pay the price for that.
I'll talk with her later.
Where are you based? I'm based in Providence, Rhode Island. That's where I have my military practice. And going back to what somebody asked before, a little bit about myself. Before Chelsea Manning, I had a military-only practice. I only represent Army soldiers. When I got out, I was in a position where I wasn't, I still have to make a living, but I was not in a position where I had to take every case given to me or every case that came through the door, so I could pick and choose my clients. And I love representing Army soldiers. For me, they're really just a wonderful bunch of men and women. And my clients are always first-time offenders. They've never been in, I guess some of them might have gotten waivers to get in, but majority of them. I've never committed any offense before. So when you think about that, they're age 18, they raise their right hand, they come into the military to serve their country, and then they commit some crime. What a luxury as a criminal defense attorney to represent somebody who's never committed a crime until that time. They're always very respectful, always wonderful clients. And that's my practice now, and I have now new clients. It's different having now more clients than Chelsea. But Chelsea's always a daily thing for me. So.
Is it always through military tribunals or civilian courts?
Always criminal, military court-martials.
Hi, I really admire you having you here. So I have two quick questions. One, can you help us know something about Chelsea's day and what could be helpful to her besides all the other work that we'll be doing that you might have said, corresponding with her or staying in touch with her in practical and meaningful ways? And two, what effect has she had on other fellow soldiers? And has there been a significant change in your mind given the response to her commands?
So Chelsea now, she's at the USDB, she has a job. She works, she does a normal kind of 9-to-5 type job. She has recreation time. I've been to the facility, it's a very nice facility. The USDB was recently renovated. I joked to her about the fact that the gym that she has is nicer than the one I pay money to go to. But she has made friends. She's in general population. There are no restrictions on her. Others know about, obviously, her and her decisions. Some people have said, comments to her that are not very nice, but for the most part, everybody has accepted her. And this kind of goes back to what I said about the luxury of having these soldiers as clients. They're all first-time offenders. So when they go to USDB themselves, Their main focus is, I just want to do my time and get home. And so these are not your hardened criminals who are out to make her life difficult. In fact, as I said, she's made friends and has never made any complaints to me. I ask her all the time if there's any issues, and she said no. And so that's kind of like her daily life there. Impact on other soldiers, that's a tricky one, because you think about your average soldier, they go through basic training, and the whole goal of basic training is to break them down to their most common element and build them up in the mindset of the military. And that's very, very effective, because when you need to tell somebody, think about this for a moment. If I said to you, hey, everybody, we're going to go out that back door, there's going to be an IED there, I'm pretty sure of it. But we need to get what's on the opposite side of that door. Some of you might be killed, and I'll write to your parents if you want. Well, let's go. None of you are going with me. And you get these men and women who do that, and they don't ask, wait a second, why are we doing that? They just do it because, their sergeant told them to, or their captain told them to. And that's the type of soldier you need. That's why we train them the way we do. We spend almost $1 million per soldier to train them. So it's very effective. And so consequently, I don't think Chelsea is very highly regarded in your active duty population. Again, I think people at the confinement facility might view her differently, because they too, in some way, shape, or form, have stepped out of what's acceptable. And I think they might have a there with the grace of God go I type mentality as well. Like, I remember one second I was a great soldier, the next second I'm the cry of the unit because I did X, Y, or Z. And I don't view myself as a cry. I view myself still as a great person. I just made a mistake, or I did something I shouldn't have done. So, United States Disciplinary Barracks.
Last question. David, thank you very much for everything you've done. Can you comment upon your feelings or your thoughts about the judge's behavior during the trial and what she might have gone on to do after the trial that might have benefited her career-wise?
All right, so you say the last question. I will tell you that she went on to be an appellate judge. And some viewed that as a promotion or whatnot, but as I explained in one interview with Alexa, it's not a promotion, it's just a natural progression. And judges go from the bench to the appellate level and then back to the bench. So it's not any sort of progression that was influenced by the sentence. As a judge, she ran her courtroom in a very disciplinary manner. She was pleasant enough. She's a very nice person when you talk to her. As an individual, she's a mother too. So she's the type of person you would think, okay, this is not a bad person. And I'm not saying she is a bad person. I'm saying she made a lot of bad rulings in my mind. I'm saying she made a bad sentence in my mind. So the attorney in me disagrees with her reasoning and the outcome. Because for me, if you just sit back, and I know I'm preaching a little bit to the choir here, but if you just sit back and you look at these facts, a 21-year-old who, going through a lot of different issues, selectively chooses information to release that she believes the American public has a right to know, that she honestly believes will save lives and make a difference and cause reforms and changes. That's what she honestly believes. And so she releases that information with that goal. Now, if those are your facts, and those are the facts, the government did not dispute those facts, how do you get to a 35-year sentence? I'm sorry, but you just don't get to that sentence. Now, if the government brought forward, you know what? Yeah, she had all this wonderful goal in mind, and she was pure of heart, pure attention, but Here are 22 people that died directly because of what she did. Here is a country where we had, a democratically elected person that was overthrown. Now there's a dictator there. Here is $29 billion worth of whatever that was, wasted because of what you released. Any of that stuff come forward, then I would say, okay, I get to 35 years. None of that came forward. There was, and I'll end with this, there was a hard fight, discovery fight, to get from the government the damage assessments for all of the information that was released. They initially wanted to say it didn't exist. They played mind games with the court and the defense on what is a draft. What's the meaning of draft? There's one meaning, and we might have something. There's another meaning where we might not. Well, a draft's a draft. Finally, we get this stuff, and I look at it and I read it, and I'm like, okay, I can see where they're making their arguments of possible damage, but it's all speculative. It's all just kind of, this could have happened, this could have happened, this still might happen. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is the worst it is, I can deal with this. Then the government brings in all their witnesses to testify to damage and sense. We have the closed hearings that none of you could be part of, and the people get up and they speak. And what comes out of their mouth causes me to say, my hard-fought victory to get these damage assessments that I desperately wanted to get into evidence, now I don't want to. Because it was a better capture of possible damage and potential harm than what came out of these witnesses' mouth. So I actually thought the government's witnesses were better mitigating evidence than what I fought hard to get a hold of. So again, having seen all that, and the judge got to see all that, to get to 35 years, that is just hard for me to understand.
I just wanted to let you know that collectively we raised $1,246.
Okay, guys. Good night. Good night, guys. Thanks.